Are we recording now?
Yeah,
Okay, good. Okay.
how's going? How's going? You're all very welcome to this podcast for myself, Adam Wilson, and I'm absolutely delighted and honoured to have Georgos from Sweden, who is an absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to strength training and, in particular, range training, which is the topic of today's podcast. So, Georgos, thanks for jumping on and tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you, Adam. Hi, guys. Yeah, I'm. My background is in sports. Is I played rugby and swim and was swimming in my teenage years. I In my 20s I started powerlifting, and probably 3 or 4 years ago I started investigating range more. And the last 2 years things have kicked off. Everything is clicking, and I've come up with some interesting ideas and concepts around range training, which I think we will discuss today.
Brilliant.
Um,
Yeah, no, brilliant. And we'll dive into them. And before we kind of get into the real meat, kind of into it real the into the range training, let's can you give a quick overview of what is range training and maybe like what's the difference between short and long range strength?
yeah, so it's not really about short or long range strength. That is a part of it. Range training is basically the understanding of how the biomechanics will change, how the tissues, what kind of stimulus the tissues will have, and what kind of adaptations they will have. Therefore, if the question, what is short range strength and what is long range strength, that is basically just the ability to contract the muscle to make a strong contraction, either in a very short range, which if you don't have the ability, the muscle will actually cramp, or in the long range, where if you do not have the ability, you'll probably get hurt. You will overstretch the tissues. But range training basically is understanding how, by changing the biomechanics, the there will be different tension on the muscles. Um, so that's basically the crux
Yeah,
when it comes to that.
yeah, I'm really and like so. If you were to give an example how yourself would use range training in a particular area of the body, how would you go about training it? What methods would you use?
Yeah, so if, for example, I wanted to let's say, for example, I have a bodybuilder client, and he wants big arms. All right, so uh, the way normally bodybuilders would train would be they train the bicep once or twice a week, very hard, um, both long and short range most of the time. But if we have the understanding that they will have they will contribute in different ways, then we can actually train the biceps every day, if we understand this concept. So an example would be that um, one day we will train more long range, which would be the arm behind the body, where we have. So to give you a better answer to your first question about long range and short range, a definition, a general rule is that if the muscle is under tension or stretched, same thing, before contracting the muscle, then it's a long range movement. If the muscle is shortened before contraction, then it's a short range movement. So a long range movement for the bicep would be if the arm is behind the body, there is already tension, my bicep is stretched, and then I'm contracting. This will create a lot of damage, a lot of inflammation, and therefore also a lot of hypertrophy. If we don't go over our tolerance and create those small damages become big damages and actually an injury. So if we're talking about strength, making big biceps, this is what will have the most hypertrophic effect. but also the next day we can train short range. So that will be something in front of the body, right? And with the short range, we have the ability to also create hypertrophy, but this will be through high repetitions, which will create lactic acid, which will raise hormone levels and turn on satellite cells to become muscle cells. So the key here is that one day we're damaging the muscle to create hypertrophy. The other day we are healing the muscle by bringing a lot of blood flow, but we are also creating hypertrophy. So we are able to train all the time. So we basically can keep improving indefinitely. So that would be a quick explanation. I could explain this in 1 hour and go into depth, different exercises, different tensions, tension distributions in the long and short range and progressions, but that is basically those are the basics.
Yeah, no, that's a really good breakdown. Really well explained there. And I suppose from, if we can kind of give an example, right, of a injury protocol, like let's say a return to play from your experience, a common injury, let's say, would be hamstrings within a lot of field sports. How would you, using that short and long range, where the short range says is healing, it's getting a lot of blood flow, and then you can use, when the tissues are able, you can do the long range stuff where it's going to have that more the structural effects, in particular the connective tissue. So, I know you could spend a whole podcast on this alone, but a very, very kind of quick overview of, let's say, how would you return to play for a hamstring injury? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So the first thing that people forget is that we do not train directly a muscle that is injured, even in the short range. We should not do that. It should be, if we're going to train a muscle that is injured in the short range, then it has to be almost healed. It must almost be ready to take it must be ready to take the tension, basically, because even though we're talking about short range having healing effects, it also has breakdown effects, like anything we do. The thing what we're trying to accomplish is to find the right ratio where the damage is being overwhelmed by the healing effects. So if the healing effects are greater than the damage we're causing, then the net benefits will be healing, right? So, but if the tissues are damaged, or it's basically like thinking like we have a rope, but it's only attached by a couple of fibers, right? So it's very easy to break this rope. So even the short range could break it. So the first thing we do is we train close by areas, close by muscles. It can be antagonist or agonist. It could be a joint up the chain or down the chain. So for the hamstrings, we can work hip flexion. We can work extension. Extension should be a little bit. We should be a little bit careful because we're putting more strain on the hamstring there. We can work knee extension. We can work calves. All this will bring blood flow to the legs and to the hamstrings to heal them up. When pain has subsided, then I would go to a band or just body weight exercise. So if I'm going to demonstrate that quickly, it would be the body weight exercise. So basically, by putting the leg behind the body and then doing a hamstring curl. This is very short range. So this would be one, and the other one would be a banded one, single leg again. So that would be something like this. And now, can you see me?
Yeah.
So this is one this is probably the one that is best to start with, but you should start with very light band tension and high repetition. So you want to do at least 60 repetitions for one set every day or every other day as you're healing up. And then to actually bulletproof the hamstrings, you need to start putting tension in the long range. So after you have the injury is healed, we have no pain, then we can start adding tension in the long range, and that can be done in many different ways. If our issues are more towards the knee, and then some kind of knee flexion exercise would be the way to go. So that could be. So one thing I really like is doing a lying machine hamstring curls, but getting up. So getting up the weight with both legs, and then doing eccentric work with one leg only, and really focusing on the end part here when we have in the long range, where we have where it would be the hardest to keep it. So here we want to go really, really slow to put the tension in the long range there in the hamstring, and especially focused close to the knee. If the injury is more up towards the hip, then probably some kind of Jefferson curl would be the way to go.
Yeah, brilliant. And like, yeah, no, really good explanation again. Like, one thing that, you know, when you get into the range training, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is, you know, explain there how you would return to play. Like, why do you think you know, what from your experience, there is still such a high amount of injuries in all levels, particularly the elite level, even though there's so much resources now, there's load management, you know, all the players nearly are doing S&C, they're quote unquote strengthening their, you know, and we know their muscles, but, you know, I know you've touched on a little bit on the long range stuff, but, you know, what from your experience, why do you think there's still such a high level of injuries within sport?
Yeah, so there is not a complete understanding of this, the benefits of the long range and the short range yet, and there is not a holistic view of these things. And if we're gonna go to the core of the problem, I think it's about it's actually an industry. It's not about getting the best results. It's about getting money. When it comes to the education, when it comes to everything, you know, it's the focus. So all the studies, all this stuff is not really made to get the best results. Is paid for to promote a certain product or to promote a certain thing. So we are living in today's society. You know, we stopped worshiping a lot of gods, and we started worshiping science instead, and we forgot about trying out things and seeing what works, you know, what actually works. It's not about reading papers or studies. Those can be an indication of what can work, but it's actually doing the practice. So I think the reason why there are a lot of injuries, one, there will always be injuries in sports, because when we're competing, there will be injuries because we're pushing ourselves to the limit. There shouldn't be injuries in training, though. And the injuries in training are because of bad leadership, bad trainers, or not bad trainers necessarily, but trainers that haven't had the experience, the personal experience to solve these problems. They have the written down experience, they have the textbooks, but they haven't done it to themselves, or they haven't done it with somebody else. So I think as things like ATG progress, as range training education progress, I think this will be the new way of the new education for for coaches. You know, I think we will move away from universities and this kind of stuff as we find the solutions to these problems. You know, by trying out things and actually putting them to practice.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, Charles Poliquin said if he'd have waited for the science to catch up, he would have missed 4 Olympic cycles. And I think it's,
exactly
the ATG and the range training, it's coming to the forefront. Although the science is still not there yet, but the results are getting harder and harder to ignore. It's not to say that the stuff that you'll never get injured doing this stuff with doing the short and the long range, but the risk is dramatically reduced from if you talk to the just nearly 1,000 coaches there on the ATG, and you listen to their stories, and the results they're getting, and dramatically decreasing. So it is only a matter of time before this sort of range training becomes more mainstream. So one question that you answered, it was brilliant, and it was kind of puzzling me for a while, was the actual, from a performance standpoint, on how the long range, the effect the long range work has on the connective tissue and the tendons. And I thought, to strengthen the tendons, you could just do plyos, whether it's extensive plyos or actually, very intensive. And that'll give you enough of a stimulus for the likes of your tendons, to get stronger and to improve. But what's your view on that, on using just plyos to strengthen your tendons? What's the difference between plyos and long range work?
Yeah. So the big difference is what kind of adaptation will come from it. So when we're doing plyometrics, there are usually, a fast reversal movement, usually a small movement with a lot of force involved. So we're basically just taking in force and reversing it. And that could be viewed as a high tension, short range movement in a way. So what will happen then is the tendons will take over, they will adapt, they will get thicker and stronger, but they will not necessarily become longer. So that is where the long range comes in. The long range will make them thicker and longer. It will not necessarily increase your capacity for plyometrics, but if you're doing it in conjunction with plyometrics, it will have a much greater effect and will keep you much safer. Because the thing is that when we're doing a plyometric, if the forces are too big, then we cannot handle those forces, and then we'll actually start getting into that longer range position, and that's when the tendon is gonna snap, or something will happen if we are not also lengthening and strengthening the tendons with long range exercises. So that is a big difference. Plyometrics will make the tendons strong and thick and able to handle a lot of force, but it will not give them the ability to handle force in the longest range of the joint movement.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the times the damage can be done, when it's your body's stretched and you're trying to produce a lot of force. And that's where a lot of the injuries can happen. Yeah.
Yes. And when we're training plyometrics, we could handle this because we can have a safe and very controlled environment. But when we get into the real world, or we get into our sport, that's not the case. So that's why we need to have the ability to get into all kinds of positions without getting injured.
Brilliant, yeah. And then another kind of benefit that, you speak to a lot of the ATG coaches or coaches that are doing range training is less, like myself, a lot less sore. Like very rarely now, it takes a lot for me to get sore now after a training session, where it's a pitch session, sprint session, gym session. It takes a lot of work. What is going on? Like what from your experience again is what's going on with the tissues? What's happening there where, and it's not just me, there's, hundreds if not 1,000 coaches actually commenting on this as well. Less soreness, less DOMS. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, in one word, the easiest and fastest way I can explain it is quality. The tissue quality is much better, which means it does not break as easily. It does not get these small damages as easily. It does not get sore as easily. It can handle a lot of more work. and it can handle a lot of more work in the long ranges. And that is an aspect of both the short range and the long range being combined in a good way. The long range will give you the quality of fibers, so on the stretch they're not getting overly damaged. It's basically like thinking of it like if you have a thin rope and you're pulling it at it all the time, you will start getting some small weak breaks, right? If the forces are strong enough. But if you have a thick ass rope, like to anchor a big boat, then it will take a lot of force and a lot of repetitions to start tearing that rope. So it's the quality of the tissues are much greater in these individuals, so that is why than in general population. So that's the reason, and so and it's also because the tissues that they are not only the quality is not only uh, is not only limited to a certain range. So because we are using all our range and strengthening it throughout the range, so the old school would be we are very strong in the mid range, but as soon as we get into some other kind of range, as soon as we become a little bit longer, or we're pushing the weight, so it's pulling us a little bit longer. Now we're having a lot of damage and we're having a lot of domes. But with ATG coaches and with people who have been training, have applying long and short range in a correct way, we have such good quality in our entire mobility, in our entire movement, that it takes a lot to break down those fibers and those tissues.
Yeah, and it's like it's a kind of winning cycle then, because you're less sore, you're less broken down, you can do more work, you can do more good quality work, and then your gains are just improving. It's phenomenal. No, that's brilliant, Georgos. It's a really good breakdown, and you answered a lot of the questions there that had in my mind. Just kind of closing then, what are you actually reading? What are you learning at the moment in terms of your training? What kind of areas are you really diving into?
Yeah, so I'm at a point where I'm not reading a lot of other stuff. I've read a lot throughout my career, and right now I'm just focusing on applying my knowledge of long and short range and trying to find new ways to new exercises, new movements, more beneficial ways to apply and program um, these concepts. So I'm working with clients, and what I do is I make a program for at least 12 weeks, and I try out things, and the things that worked go into the programs of my clients. So that's how I go about it. And what so to give you one little thing, just a thing that is missing from a lot of people's understanding, and which I'm focusing a lot on, and which is really what I'm doing different from ATG and from other people who are doing long and short range, is that I'm focusing a lot on the distribution of tension in the movements. So I'm looking at where will the tension be? Will the tension be in the long range? Will the tension be in the short range? And by understanding this, I can program these movements in a much better way, and get better results. That is the missing link, I think, right now in the understanding of range, is the tension distribution in a movement.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And yeah, I think it's a different way of looking of program design. It's not, as we know, it's not now about the what the sets, what the exercise for a different muscle group is. It's as you said, it's where that tension is going to be, and the difference that has on the effect of the stimulus that's going in that area, is massive. No, brilliant, yeah. Georgos. Really enjoy that. Thanks a lot for your time. And if people want to find more about you, where can they look for?
Thank you, Adam. You can look at my Instagram, Range Training Man, on Instagram. That's the main way people can find me. I'm setting up a site as well, but that will be later. So stick to the Instagram, and information will come there for other things as well. Yeah.
Brilliant, Range. Appreciate all that, and be in touch, Georgos. Thanks very much. All the best.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.